We're going to turn to London now. Muhammad Fraser-Rahim of Quillam International. That's the who joins us rather from Washington. Quillam International, which is an organization devoted to counter-extremism. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Thank you very much.
You just heard our correspondent reporting from Sri Lanka. Several points to go over. First of all, your reaction to the aftermath and the mood right now in Sri Lanka.
You know, we all of us, civil society, religious community, and the global world, we stand in solidarity with these innocent victims who just want to engage in a moment of reflection with the divine, with the Creator. And unfortunately, they were killed by individuals who have subscribed to an extremist ideology. And so first and foremost, the victims themselves are certainly front and center for all of us. For us, particularly working at Quillam, I mean, I worked in our U.S. intelligence community for over a decade. So I understand these issues very well. What's the immediate aftermath, how to deal with putting together this puzzle of what actually took place. And I can certainly imagine that not just the Sri Lankan government, but they are certainly getting assistance from Western societies to assist to find out what's happening at the local level, and particularly any connection to international networks as well.
Yeah, there's on the one hand the Indians front and center, because they were the ones who reportedly sounded the alarm that wasn't heeded. But also, as you mentioned, Western agencies, the UK, the FBI. What would the FBI be doing in such a circumstance right now?
So right now, this is really the hard work of investigatory efforts. So certainly the Indians are there, they're the big regional players, but certainly the FBI and other Western nations are going to be offering their assistance, particularly doing a post-mortem analysis of what took place, forensic data to see what actually, what was sort of orchestrated and what was designed. And so that technical assistance will certainly be quite helpful for those who are in Sri Lanka. The technical assistance will be helpful for those who are trying to find out if there are other individuals who are out there, if there are other networks or potential plotting and planning that might be on the immediate near future. We also have to keep in mind next week Ramadan likely will start. So we know that extremist groups have used this moment, particularly in heightened religious fever, that we just came out of Holy Week and certainly coming into the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. Extremist groups see this as a moment to continue to strike, continue to target. And I think that's certainly concerning, not just for all of us collectively, but certainly those who are working on security service, are working in security services all over the world.
When the Paris attacks happened, Muhammad Fraser-Rahim, it turned out that most of the recruits were people from working class neighborhoods, oftentimes who had been radicalized in prisons. In this instance, it sounds a little bit more like the profile of the 9/11 attackers. You heard the defense minister of Sri Lanka talking them as being well-educated, from economically strong families. Some went abroad to study. One went to Australia for a law degree. Two of the bombers were brothers, son of a wealthy spice trader and pillars of the business community. What does that all tell you?
You know, this is showing some interesting patterns that we saw early post 9/11. We saw Al-Qaeda itself certainly resurging, but we know in Glasgow, Scotland, we knew there was an attack carried out by an individual who had an engineering or medical background as well. And so what we're seeing is a diversification of extremist groups seeking to recruit into new communities as well. This isn't new per se, but what we're seeing is tactics to diversify their influence and then also executing their plan and also showing that they have what I would consider in extremist circles resiliency too as well. We can't forget, certainly ISIS has been degraded both within Syria and Iraq. We certainly see their efforts being degraded, and we saw in the Philippines, and we see, but we also have emerging groups. I mean, Al-Qaeda is still resurging. They have been around. They have been slowly making statements saying that, listen, we were the beginning organization in terms of establishing the extremist brand. And so what I think collectively we need to do is to recognize the diversity of threats that are coming, the ability that terrorist groups are being purposeful, meaningful in their efforts, and particularly that they have not just the ability to strike at a local level, but they're also able to pull off of financial assistance, economic assistance throughout their global reach as well. That's concerning not just for the Sri Lankans, but that should be concerning for other regional nation states within South Asia, and certainly those who are all over the world too as well. This localization of the threat is certainly concerning, and it shows that we continue to have to be engaged on this issue on an everyday basis.
A localization, or rather is it simply that it's a group that takes advantage of globalization to hit a soft target in this country where you have a president and a prime minister who aren't speaking to each other and thus security lapses, perhaps?
Well, I think there's two dynamics. There's the global threat that's taking place, and then there's also the local reality. Individuals who live in their respective locations understand the terrain much better than individuals who are from elsewhere. We have precedents to this certainly in West Africa. An organization called Tawheed wa Jihad in West Africa recruit individuals from the local area because they were able to case and be able to carry out they understood the neighborhood. So certainly I think in this same context we have this as well. And certainly it is sort of that dynamic of both a local reality, but also certainly the globalization. Maybe that's a better terminology. The globalization of the threat certainly is concerning for all of us as well.
The original statement put out on ISIS's propaganda website talked about 7 attackers. Then there was that picture or video which showed 8. And now Sri Lankan authorities are talking about 9 suicide bombers, including 1 female. What does that tell you?
Well, again, as we mentioned earlier too as well, we've seen this recently too as well, is that the increasing use of women, again, using individuals with higher educational background as well. We saw the case of Shamima Begum, certainly in the United Kingdom context, and Hoda Manthana, the American citizen too as well. So I think we're seeing the use of women, perhaps children, and unfortunately we've seen in other extremist groups using this. So again, I think the diversity, the spectrum of how extremist groups are seeking to have readily available individuals who are interested in this extremist interpretation, this Islamist narrative, this Salafi jihadist narrative, and I think using an array of options that's available for them shows these groups are interested to carry out efforts in a measure that we certainly are seeing on the rise in the region as well.
Do you take that ISIS propaganda website at its word when it says it was retaliation for the New Zealand mosque attacks last month where a white supremacist was the shooter?
You know, I take this as sort of twofold. One, this is a tactical operation that was carried out by individuals who might use the moniker ISIS. They might use the moniker of another name. In the end, what these groups are seeking to do is cause fear and intimidation. And so using this brand, particularly ISIS, certainly allows them to carry on this sort of propaganda effort for not only the short and also the long term. We also have to remember this attack was not just against Christians. This was against, we saw a hotel. We saw that later that there was bombings or leftover the effort of trying to carry out attack in the airport as well. And so what we see is a diversification, the interest to reach out certainly to target obviously Christian populations, but also to other soft targets as well. So for those who are in Sri Lanka in particular, this should not just be a wake-up call, but this certainly should be seen as there is a real threat that's taking place, and that this could just be the beginning, but certainly even if it's not just the beginning, this is certainly a reality that's happening. And for those who are, particularly the religious minority communities, particularly Muslim communities, have to certainly be aware of the reality of what's taking place.
All right, we'll have to leave it there, unfortunately, because we're out of time. But Muhammad Fraser-Rahim of Quillam International, many thanks for joining us from Washington.
Thank you very much.